Hello, welcome. Today I'm going to read you a spooky story, one of my favorites. I found this story from the podcast Full Body Chills. It is such a great storytelling podcast that posts a new story every day of October. They're going on their 5th season now. This story is specifically from season 1, episode 6. I highly recommend listening to the podcast. They have professional voice actors and podcasters reading these stories and do such a better job than I do. So make sure you check them out. I have this story linked in the description below. And without any further ado, here is Red Ribbon by Minnie Schedeen. The leaves crunch beneath my hiking boots. In the silence of the forest, the noise is almost deafening. I could hear a pin drop if I had a pin with me with all these trees. But I don't. There's nothing sharp for miles around. Believe me, I made sure of it. All I have are the clothes on my back, the thick strap of my backpack cutting into my bare shoulder. It isn't hot here, not yet. I've started early enough in the morning that the sweltering midsummer heat won't get to me yet, but hopefully by the time it breaks through the trees, I'll be deep enough into the forest where the tallest pine trees grow and I'll be protected by their comforting cool shade. Until then, I put one foot in front of the other. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I designed it this way to be so completely isolated. I needed to be alone, needed to get away from, well, everything, needed time to think. While isolation may be trivial to some, I can basically count on my hand the number of times I've ever been alone. Like, ever? I'm one of 5 in my family. In my whole childhood, my whole life has been nothing but non-stop chatter from everyone around me. Being the middle child never helped either. I'm not sure how much anyone ever paid attention to me, or even listened or cared. But now I'm going to be the center of my own world. Breathe without someone else interrupting or forcing a thought into my head without my consent. I plan to hike 3 miles deep into the forest, making sure to leave markers on the trail as I did so. That way I don't get lost. I've been wrapping ribbons around trees as I go too, just to make sure. I dyed the ribbons red with leftover dye I found in a dusty, unused corner of my apartment in the city. Dye I'd initially bought for some abandoned pet project. I thought that might be my new career. I've always done things like that for as long as I can remember. Picking up hobbies, hoping they'd turn into real work. I would quickly get bored, or worse yet, I would realize I'm not even good at the thing I was trying to do in the first place. I was always disappointing my parents. The most disappointing of all my siblings, in fact. Hank, Sally, Truman, Wendy, Robbie, they all had so much more to offer than I ever did. But then again, maybe they made sure of it, made sure I was the failure so they could shine. Better not think about that now. Not yet. Right now, I need to stay focused on maintaining a rhythm. A pace for how many steps I should go and how many ribbons I should wrap around trees. On the 5th tree, I stop to admire my handiwork. I see the slippery, silky ribbon pulled tight around the wooden trunk like a dark ruby necklace stretched across a fine lady's neck, or the line of blood trickling across someone's skin after their throat's been cut. The image makes me shiver. I keep walking. I think briefly about the idea of getting lost so that no one ever found me. Girl with troubled past disappears into woods never to be found again. I laugh at that headline. That would really be something, I think to myself. Come all the way out here just to get lost in the woods? No, that's not my plan. I came here to be found. Just focus on the steps in front of you, Amy. The wind at the nape of your neck, the trees moving in the sunlight. I don't know this forest well, only remember it faintly from a memory long ago. My class took a field trip to these very woods. It's how I even know that they were here. I'm replicating what we did with what I was doing now. Hike 3 miles into the forest, spend the night, hike back. I don't know why we did it back then. My school was very focused on the outdoors that way. They were always wanting us to get outside, come out of our shells. Ugh. I wish it had worked on me, but if anything, it made me retreat farther into mine. On this particular trip, our teacher focused on survival skills, taught us how to find naturally occurring ibuprofen and filter out river water with dark gray charcoal. We slept under crinkly tarps beneath the bright stars and the deep blue black skies. And in the morning, we ate dried food out of hollowed out coconut shells. Our teacher, and I guess by extension, our school itself, wanted to teach us about real life and what it meant to have true grit. How to be Lewis and Clark. Back when there were no planes or trains or automobiles. But now that I think about it, it wasn't realistic. At least there was nothing truly dangerous about what we were doing out here. We were only 12. And there were chaperones everywhere, which why it never made sense to anyone who told the story later how Jackson got lost. We had a boy in our class, quiet, read a lot. His name was Jackson. I sort of liked him, sensed something in him that I had in me, a feeling of loneliness, of quiet desperation, like he was asking for someone, anyone, to pay attention to him. Sometimes he picked fights with other school kids. I heard several stories that Jackson ran away from home often as a little kid. Sometimes I heard that his dad beat him, but I didn't know if that was just gossip passed around nosy middle schoolers with too much free time on their mind. It was a dark rumor to be spreading around for a bunch of 12-year-olds, I must admit. He never had any bruises that I could see, but I find sometimes the deepest bruises are the ones you can never see with the naked eye. Those are the ones that hurt the most and last the longest, after the final blow is felt. Before anyone realized he was missing, before the chaperones raised the alarms, and we huddled up in a circle and gave our alibis, I saw Jackson. I guess if you think about it that way, I was the last person to see him alive. I had been playing by myself at the sharp rocks at the bottom of the waterfall, several yards from our campsite. I planned on collecting all the pretty stones I could find, the ones that were blue and purple in certain lights, the ones that reminded me of sea glass and gemstones. I was going to keep them and bring them home with me and have something that none of my brothers and sisters could have. I remember cradling one particular gemstone in my hand. It was iridescent in the soft afternoon light. Then a shadow crossed my palm. I looked up, and it was right then that I saw Jackson standing on a ledge. He was just staring at me, his face solemn. I could tell his face was wet, but I couldn't tell if it was from the spray of the waterfall or standing on a ledge or just something else. Years later, I would always wonder if he was crying or not. He seemed so sad back then. But I didn't think about any of that right at the moment. Instead, I just waved at him. But if I was expecting anything from him, I was sorely mistaken. He didn't wave back. He didn't do anything. He just stared at me. It kept staring until a shiver ran down my spine. And I got up angry. Angry that such a kid thought he could make me feel weird by just staring. After the chaperones realized he was gone, they rounded up my crying classmates and shepherded us back to the beginning of the trail so we could finally call the police and have someone come look for him. They would look for him for 5 days before calling off the search. The forest was just too big and he would have run out of food by then. I never told anyone I was the last to see him because what good would that do? Jackson was already long gone. Later, when we were assigned to speak with a school psychologist just to make sure we weren't scarred too much by Jackson's death, kids in my class would say that his disappearance was one of the saddest moments of their young adult lives. That it was the first time they came across death or true sadness and loss. They often said that trip forever would be marked by this horrible tragedy. I said as much when it was my turn to talk to the psychologist. She looked at me sympathetically when I told her I wasn't sleeping well and had nightmares about Jackson. Then she handed me a Jolly Rancher and asked me to bring in the next kid. That was so long ago now. I wonder why my most vivid memory from that afternoon was not the words coming out of my mouth, but the sickly, sweet Jolly Rancher as it rolled around my tongue. If I were to be really honest here, and I guess this now is ever a time to be honest, I look back at that trip as one of the happiest of my childhood because for once in my small little life, I was finally away from my family. Finally got to taste and feel what my thoughts were without one of them yammering in my ear or shoving something down my throat. Sure, we all went to the same school, but thankfully none of us were the same age. And so those 3 days, they were all mine. Missing Jackson and all. Oh crap, shoot. How many trees have I passed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? I'll just put one here. God. Oh God, I feel lightheaded. I need to sit down. Remember why you're here. I didn't mean to, I swear. Oh, great. Now I'm talking to the trees, but I'm not, right? The trees can't hear me. What's that old saying? If a tree breaks in the forest? No, that's not right. If a tree collapses? No, what's the word? If a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to see it, does it even make a sound? That's gotta be right. I've got it. That's it. I'm not totally crazy, right? But the thing is, I'm here in the forest and I can hear the trees. And the trees can hear me. They're hearing me, what I'm saying. What I'm admitting to you right now in the deep dark silence. They can hear it. Will they tell anyone? I guess at this point you're wondering if I have the ability to explain my descent into whatever drove me to do it. Insanity? Craziness? Are those the words? Or am I too far gone to really explain the situation? I can give you reasons and they would probably be right. If you ask a psychologist specializing in the murder of your entire family, I'm sure there are a few specialists out there, however gruesome they may seem. They'd explain, pinpoint something about me being a middle child. I killed my family in cold blood. I did. I did the thing you never think of doing, never dream of doing in a million years. They're my family, they say. Family. What a funny word. It never really meant anything to me. It was a synonym for nuisance rather than love, for judgment rather than acceptance. Family meant your father yelled at your mother and your brother stuck bugs so far down your ears as you slept, you had to be rushed to the ER to get them out. Family meant your sister stole your prom dress and spilled grape juice down the front of it the moment your date rang the doorbell. Family meant comparison, competition, never being yourself. One entity, one person in charge of your own destiny. Family meant someone was always getting in the way. I told you, I never was alone. They were always there, even as I got older, went to college, moved into my own apartment, tried to get away. They were always dropping by, always wondering why I never made much out of my life, never followed in any of their footsteps, never applied myself. So I snapped. I'm not saying it was good. I'm not saying I agree with why I did it either. I'm only telling you the thinking that went into it. The moment I made a rash decision and then had to carry it through. You know what I said about being honest? Well, I lied about that. I lied about something else too. I told you the ribbons were dyed with paint, but that isn't true. Not true at all. If you really want to know, I'll tell you. The ribbons were dyed with blood. I know it wasn't right. It's why I'm telling all of this now, as if admittance is any sort of trade for the lives I stole from them. But they stole mine, right? Or have I been wrong my whole life? Read things the wrong way, alienated myself when they were only trying to help? Trying to love me? I guess I'll never know. I don't know why that frightens me the most. I lied about something else too. Jackson, I know where he is. Where his bones are buried is because I buried him. All those years ago, Jackson was a bully. Did he deserve to die? I don't know. But he bullied me, made me feel small. Small like the other kids made him. When I saw him on that rock and how he didn't wave back, I got angry. So very angry. He angered me with his silence, just like my family angered me with their noise. So I stood up and went over to him and wrapped my fingers around his neck. That was the beginning of it, of an anger I couldn't control. I thought I would never do it again, but here we are, all those years later, and I'm admitting it to you now. By the time you're listening to this, I should be dead. The ribbons having led you to my corpse in the middle of the national forest, my hand clutching the very recorder I'm speaking these words into. The tape probably stopped by the time you've reached me. Jackson is buried a few feet to my left. I hope his family may now find peace. I know I will. I told you before I didn't come here to get lost in the forest. No, I came here to be found. Now, come find me. I hope you enjoyed that story. It's one of my favorites. Remember to check out Full Body Chills, the podcast, linked in the description below. I hope to post more spooky stories this month, so please subscribe and like if you enjoyed it. So long.